starting with strategies for effectively steering the conversation without controlling it, because you need to be respectful of the people that you're talking to. So, in your experience, Gillian, when things go off track, how do you rein it in without coming off defensive or somewhat controlling?
Yeah. I mean, this happens all the time, doesn't it? And I think the first thing to note, and it took me such a long time to learn this, to be honest, is not to assume that it's a problem. Because I think because of everything that Joan just said, the stakes are so high, we can default to this worst case scenario. But the thing is, senior executives, they think fast. They're connecting the dots instinctively. They often jump to this wider lens. They have a perspective of the business that you don't have access to. And I know it can feel a little disorientating if they suddenly veer off in a completely different direction. And you might be thinking, gosh, I'm losing them here. But I would say don't jump too quickly. I know the desire is to go, hey, we need to get back on track here. But don't rush too quickly. Maybe just give it a moment, like listen, because sometimes that small detour gives you an insight into what they're really worried about or what's influencing their thinking behind the scenes. So give it a bit of space. And then, yes, if you have to rally them, then you're going to have to rally them to return to the discussion. But how you do it matters more than what you say. I really do think tone becomes everything in a moment like that. And to your point, Kerry, you don't want to be dismissive or demanding or sound defensive in any way. So we just want a gentle way, but still assertive, to bring them back. And you might just say something as simple as, this is really helpful, listening or exploring X. To make sure we land on what we need to today, may I bring us back to blah. So you acknowledge and then you make the request. It's respectful, it's kind of steady, and it keeps the room feeling intelligent rather than managed. And I like that.
Oh, I like that. Keeps the room feeling intelligent rather than managed. And also the point you make about don't withhold the tendency to jump and cut it off too quickly or too prematurely, because I think it's really important to remember, what is the objective? The objective isn't for you to get through your presentation. The objective is to help these executives reach a decision that's in the best interest of the business. And sometimes that takes having those critical, kind of what feels to you off tangent conversations, but might be essential to making sure that they reach the right decision. So there's a lot of judgment calls that you're having to make in the moment. I know times there's, in my head, I'm thinking, this is essential. We've got to give some airtime for this. What am I going to cut so that we can still get through the conversation?
I think, Mary, if I may, I think what Gillian had said was also really interesting because, and what you mentioned earlier is, again, I'm fairly seasoned now, but I still sometimes go down into the same mistake of being defensive and trying to control that conversation because I'm thinking in my head, dang it, I've got 30 slides or I've got 15 slides. I got to nail these points and I have to do it. And if you go off track, I'm trying to bring it back on and I got to bite my tongue because sometimes you forget, right? You forget the outcome of what you're trying, the goalpost of what you're trying to get through. And then you come off being really defensive because you found that you've got to be able to, like, why are you questioning me, for example? Like, how dare you? It's a normal human reaction, I would just say. So I have often at times going like, oh, you idiot, but also at the same time, you've got to take a deep breath and go like, okay, how do I, exactly to Gillian's point, make this an intelligent conversation, an intelligent room without coming, being curt, dismissive, defensive, angry, because, you got cut off, for example, or the fact that the conversation went off track. I think that's really important.
Yeah, thank you. I so appreciate you sharing that. And it's understandable. We just talked about how much effort and time goes into preparing for that moment. How much is at stake? So it's a completely natural reaction.
Yeah.
And being aware of your tendencies, I think, really helps so that you can go in really conscious and have the mindset to really try to manage that and refrain from jumping in too quickly. Bianca, I see you nodding. You're clearly relating to all of this. Let's bring you into the conversation. How do you decide when to stick to your key message versus pivot based on where the conversation's going?
I really echo what Gillian and Joan said. To me, one of the things that I now do quite religiously is really setting the intent as you are preparing in going into. So it doesn't come in, just during the meeting, but you have to do it before. And I think this really serve two purposes because when you go into a particular, like to your point, Carrie, what is the objective? Right? So there's a topical objective, but there's also an intent that you want to. Do you want some good discussion and debate for alignment? Do you actually want a decision to be made? Sometimes you don't necessarily need that. Or do you actually want alignments among people and what is it? Or you want to collect feedback sometimes. So I think before going into a meeting, setting the intent for ourselves is very important because that's how you decide whether you pivot or not or stick to your message. Because ultimately it's not sticking just to the content, but sticking to the intent of that meeting. And what I now also do is makes it very explicit as well. So as you're going into the meeting, now oftentimes I go in when I introduce the topic, I will also be very explicit about my intent for this. So if the intent, because of time urgency or whatnot, decision must be made in this meeting, you also set the intent early on and say, well, because of this, we have to make a decision today. And so that sets the tone of where you want this to go to, and also hopefully help to kind of bring back that to the audience as well. But again, if you if if the conversation pivot in the way that's in line with the intent, they can go along with it because I fully agree with Gillian at the time that sometimes it's those conversation that gives you deeper understanding of what's going on in different people's mind and collecting those input that sometimes seemingly looks different, looks like they're not aligned, but you can also find little points from those conversations to bring people back to be aligned, right? So for example, let's say everybody has a cost concern, but this person may have this cost concern, that person may have that cost concern. You can always use those little elements during a conversation to bring back people and say, okay, looks like everybody has a cost concern. What is our priority? To look through that, or maybe say, hey, I understand this is a big element. Let us take it back and come back to you, on analysis. So I think letting the conversation goes is also extremely important as long as it stays on track with the intent.